About 30 years ago, when my parents applied for grant aid and were turned down at the time, saying the land didn't have enough topsoil, and that was for spruce, even though there's a whole mountainside, a whole hillside of spruce up there. And I have the original letter of refusal up in the shed, saying there's not enough topsoil here. But as you can see, there is plenty of topsoil. So then, when my daughter is 21, so the year after she's 22. So the year after she was born, probably the year she was born, I made the application. Forestry company came out, and they said they'd plant oak and natives, alder, oak and larch on the good ground, which is up here, and ash and alder on the wet ground. So it's mostly alder with bundles of ash. And the system they used at the time, I don't know if contractors are still doing it, but it's a trench and mound system. So they work down these rows you can see, and every other row was oak, and every first row was larch. So you have oak and larch and oak and larch and oak and larch down this way. And they dug trenches to facilitate the speed at which they could plant. But as a result, management in the long term has been really difficult. So I've been left with these big trenches, and I've only a small tractor. I have a small specialized tractor. So that's made it really difficult to work. It's a system that's designed around a big harvester, a big machine that will come and thin or clear fell. So a system I don't really agree with. So in the meantime, I've done 2 thinnings. On year 12, I came along with Eugene Kern's help, came along the rows of larch, crown lifted everything, so cut off all the branches. So it was very labour intensive. And then took, at the time, what were the bigger larch, because it'd be more profitable. So that was my first bit of firewood, and I sold some of it for building timber in the round. Took the bigger ones and left the smaller larch. That was on year 12, and that was my first thinning. And then on year 20, last year, clear felled the remaining. So got a second crop. So it was very dark in here while the larch was still here, and the larch were also competing with the oaks. So the oaks were starting to struggle. So at some period, I say the larch are good. They call it a nurse crop. And some people, and maybe I would do that in future, you fell to waste. So they'll just fell the larch, which is really quick, and let it all rot, and they don't really do anything with it, and it'll enrich the soil and feed all the fungi, which is great. So that's a system you could definitely do. But as soon as the larch was gone last year, you can see the place went mad. So the way I see it, I ran the pigs in here. I think they enjoy it. Well, pigs are a woodland animal anyway, so the pigs love it in here. The relationship between the pigs, the pig's snout and the soil is something I'm learning a little bit about from Brendan Guinan above in Laois. And in woodland, you have high fungi and low bacteria ratio. And in pasture, you have the opposite. You've got high bacteria and low fungi, which is why if you take a tree on its own and plant it in pasture, it'll struggle. But if you have a group of trees, they'll as well as shade and shelter. But it's all about the fungi. And the pigs, they bring the bacteria fungi balance more into balance. So which is why, like, as I ran pigs in here a good bit, which is why I think now I've no control area, which is why I think that the pasture is coming back so well in this woodland, like, because this is 20-year-old oak. You wouldn't imagine there'd be so much grazing in a 20-year-old oak woodland. And I maintain it's because of the pigs in the system. But I also ran the ewes in here for a spell, and you can see this regrowth now after their manure in the place has come back lovely. And the sheep seem dead happy in here. Yep, because springs can be touch and go, as you know. They can be the weather. Sure, it's the middle of May now and pissing rain for 2 days, so So I say they benefit a lot, like, you know, especially the lambs, like they put on massive gain when they're only small. Until the oak canopy closes, I imagine I have a bit of agroforestry here. So I'd like to probably lamb in here next year for, because I'm late lambing these days, for shade and shelter. So if it's miserable weather, there's a bit of shade, and if it's really hot, like we've been getting some hot springs the last few years, there's shelter in here. So that's the plan really with the oak short term. With the plantation of ash dieback, I think if depending on your objectives, if you wanted woodland or agroforestry, in fairness to the department, they've offered ash plantation owners a brand new suite of grant aid, so you can start from the start again. And if you want to plant agroforestry instead of forestry, like instead of ash like it was, then you can start again from scratch, which is, I think that's actually really beneficial for a lot of farmers that might that you know mightn't quite understand what agroforestry means, and might feel that, you know, they're lacking a bit of grazing, or they might like a bit of winterage for their livestock. And I think agroforestry could definitely be a tool in a farm system, not necessarily the whole farm, but like you see in the Burren, they went, you know, in terms of winterage, like, you know, I think livestock, especially suckler beef and sheep, will benefit loads. I had a couple of wethers, so they're nearly 2.5 year and 8 months, ram lambs, well, a year and a half old, brought to the butcher recently, and he was really impressed. So I was explaining to him the system. My butcher knows what I have here, and he was impressed with the fat content. I also slaughtered a cull yo, like an old yo that was old, with the intention of feeding her, turning her into mince and feeding her to the dogs. But she was also so healthy that he took some fat from the wethers and ran it through the mince of the mutton, and he maintained it was really high quality stuff. You know, I don't know a whole pile about butchering, you know, but I certainly put that down to the environment that the animals are growing up in. You know. Because it's not just ryegrass in here. There's all different types. So the sheep and pigs will browse. They'll nibble the brambles. They won't really do much damage to the brambles, but they're getting a real diverse food supply here, and that can only benefit the health of the animal. In terms of their gut as well, you know, browsing on there's low hanging willow, and that's full of salicylic acid, which will help for worms. So there's certainly, I suppose, like we know that animals that browse are healthier, and as a result are happier, and it's a higher quality product as well. It's a higher quality meat, like.
Well, it was back around September, October. Rossa brought a couple of lambs into us, and no, I was for a guy who's not been farming all that long either. I was very surprised at how good a quality the animals were. They would compare favorably against some of the best lambs that we'd be putting through, you know, all year. The meat that we're producing out of our own abattoir, like the farmers bring the lambs to our abattoir. It's a very relaxed situation, you know. You're only bringing in a handful every time, and it definitely reflects in the finished product. My customers appreciate knowing where the meat comes from, absolutely, and that it comes from the local area as well. People coming down from Cork and Dublin in the summer, they really appreciate being able to get, you know, proper local produce, because they don't have that available to them in the cities, really. Like,
Having a local butcher is a no-brainer for me. William is aware of the setup I have, and that I'm not rushing to finish the animal either. He's aware that they're agroforestry grown wethers, that the lamb is coming from, and that I run them in the forestry as well, in the woodland as well. So he was impressed. He thought that they had been finished on nuts, but they were just finished on grass. High quality food production is there's a good market for it in West Cork. I think people in West Cork understand cottage industry and high quality organic produce and are willing to pay the extra for it. So for me, it's a no-brainer using my local butcher, and he's able to do it in a box. So half a lamb in a box, and I can sell it directly to my customers that way, rather than worrying about. So I have a list of customers that are waiting for this year's lambs to be ready. This is my only agroforestry plot. There's a stream behind you dividing the field into the east side and the west side. I cut 18 round bales of haylage off one side, so you could double that up easily. And I think no matter what your shape your field, these are rectangular fields, so it's that easy. But no matter what your setup, I think your decision on where to have your rows of trees should be based around your tractor. Like your garden should be based around your wheelbarrow, for example. Like we decided on an 8-meter spacing. To get the numbers up, I kind of went thicker on the edges of the field, and these are 4-meter rows. So there's still loads of space to take even a modern tractor, but up and down, I flail it sometimes. There's a little bit of fern and gorse coming in. I had sheep as a child. I really like working with them. In the agroforestry, there's definitely no reduction in flock size with trees in the system. I think it'll be 15 years at least before the trees start to shade out the grass so much that the grass yield will drop. There seems to be among farmers farmers I spoke to, and I know a lot of farmers, there seems to be an idea that if you introduce trees into your system, then immediately overnight your grass yield is going to drop and you have to lower your stocking rates, and that's really not true. It'll be a long time, the trees will be a long time developing and casting enough shade to have an impact on your grazing. And you can see for yourself, these trees are 20 years old and there's grazing under them. So in the short term, what I'm learning is that the ecosystem services, a fancy word scientists use, ecosystem services are all the services we get from your ecosystem. And in this case, the trees in the system are providing me, the landowner, but also the soil and the livestock with all of these other benefits. And what we have to do is, in terms of managing them, is just to weigh up these benefits. Is this tree creating so much shade that the grass yield is that low, or is this shade helping benefiting the animals when they're young, And so it's just a question of management. Like, it's really quick and easy to cut a tree down, and then you can heat your house with it. Like, so it's much better to have the trees in the system and to decide to thin them out and to keep the ones you want, and rather than not have them there at all, in my opinion.